Hello, my name is Jeison Piña.
And my name is Gabriela Rodríguez. Welcome to our video activity 4 about the summary of the book The Boy from Yesterday. The author's name is John Davidge. John Davidge writes both fiction and non-fiction, adapting many books for students learning English as a foreign language. He lives near the sea in Dorset, south of England.
The story takes place in a holiday on a village at Seaver's Carriage, near the sea and not too far from the center of the village.
The main characters in the history are Patty Dale, is Mrs. Dale's daughter, and Will's twin. She's a generous 15-year-old girl. Will Dale is Mrs. Dale's son and Patty's twin. He is a kind 15-year-old boy. Mrs. Dale is Patty and Will's mom. She works very hard and she's a writer. Mrs. Burns works for Mr. Webb. She's a tall and friendly woman with a red smiley face.
The main characters in the history also are Mr. Webbs, is Mrs. Burns' boss and owner of the carriage. Roger is a 15 years old boy and Mr. Webb's grandson. Patty and Will's grandmother, Patty and Will's grandfather, George Filton, the smuggler who lived in the Seaver house, Dan Filton, the smuggler's son and the ghost of the village. Chapter 1 Seaver Carriage. Patty, Will, and Mrs. Dale arriving at Seaver Carriage, where Mrs. Burns automatically welcomes them and comments that she worked for Mr. Webb, who's the owner of the carriage and lives with his grandson, Roger, who is 15 years old, as Patty and Will. Mrs. Dale and Mr. Burns had a conversation in the garden while the twins checked the bedrooms.
Chapter 2 A Telephone Call. Patty and Will went for a walk on the beach and it started to rain, so they wondered what Roger was doing on days like this. While Mrs. Dale was working, the phone rang. Will was making dinner and Patty watched him. It was the twins' grandfather calling to say their grandmother was ill, so Mrs. Dale decided to go to the hospital alone. Later that same night, Mrs. Dale called the twins and told them their grandmother was the same and tried to talk about the cottage but couldn't. At 5 a.m. the next morning, Will heard some noise and knew it wasn't because of the rain or the wind.
Chapter 3 The Boy in the Garden. During breakfast time, Patty talked about see someone moving between the trees, and of course thinking it was Roger. So they thought there was something strange about the clothes Roger was wearing, 'cause they see from a long time ago. Patty and Will's mom called an hour later to tell them their grand was better and to ask how they were doing. But they didn't want to worry their mother, so they said everything was all right and that they were going to the village shop later. While walking through big pools of water to get across the garden, Will saw a boy and again thought it was Roger watching them.
Chapter 4 The Picture. After going shopping, they had to stop because of the water in Patty's shoes. In a doorway of another shop, they saw a picture of the Siebert's house from 1884. Some people called it the smuggler's house because George Felton, the smuggler, lived there. The water was moving fast, so Patty carried a couple of bags and Will walked head down. He fell at the bottom of a hole. Patty tried to help him, but they weren't close enough, so Patty went to get somebody to help her.
Chapter 5. The Face. Patty knocked on Mr. Webb's door, but Mrs. Burns answered and told her that he went to London yesterday. Patty told Mrs. Burns about William's action situation and asked her to help him. The water was around William's knees now, and the hole was filling really fast. As Will tried to describe himself by thinking of smugglers he saw ahead, he had black hair and big dark brown eyes. Will screamed for help, but although the boy didn't speak, helped Will head out. Will could see the trees and the rain through him. Patty and Mrs. Burns found Will on the road. He looked strange. Why walking will tell them about the boy that helped him. That wasn't Roger because according to Mrs. Burns, Roger was in London with his grandfather. Will described the boy and the Mrs. Burns said it was Danfield, your film's son, who died 100 years ago.
Chapter 6. A Smuggler's Story. They established that the boy helping Will was in fact Dan Felton, but the twins wanted to know what happened with him, so Mrs. Burns told them the story. Dan didn't know about his father's activities, so he asked him, but he avoided the questions. Dan followed his father that same night through a tunnel under the cliff, but the ground fell in on top of him. The smugglers heard the noise, and only later George Felton realized it was his son in there, so they closed the tunnel. Mrs. Dale returned the next day, and both of the twins went to meet her. She told them Gran was better and talked about the cottage, and added that the ghost was good and helps people. Mrs. Dale, Will, and Patty started their holiday after this.
It's time to say goodbye for now. We look forward to our next video activity. Regards.